James and Emily had built a life that others admired from afar. Their relationship began in college, where they were known as the perfect couple. James, with his calm demeanor and sharp intellect, was an architect who loved designing spaces that told stories. Emily, an interior designer, complemented him perfectly, often adding the finishing touches to his projects. Together they seemed to craft not just homes but dreams. Their marriage was celebrated by friends and family alike. A small ceremony by the lake where they first met solidified their union. Soon after, James's career took off, and they moved into a beautiful suburban house, a culmination of their combined vision. For 10 years, their life seemed idyllic. They had 2 children, Mia and Ethan, who brought endless joy and laughter to their home. James was a hands-on father who read bedtime stories and planned weekend adventures. Emily, with her natural warmth, ensured their home always felt welcoming. Their community respected and adored them, and they became the go-to couple for advice on relationships. James believed their bond was unshakable. They shared everything, or so he thought. His trust in Emily was absolute, and their teamwork extended beyond their professional lives. They planned, built, and supported each other in every endeavor. So when small cracks began appearing in their perfect facade, James dismissed them as the natural wear and tear of a decade-long marriage. It began subtly. Emily started coming home late more frequently, often blaming it on work or social events with friends. Her explanation seemed plausible, and James, who always avoided unnecessary conflict, chose not to question her further. But something felt different. Emily, once so open and expressive, had grown distant. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now felt stilted, as if she was guarding some part of herself. James's suspicions grew when Emily became unusually protective of her phone. While she used to leave it lying around, she now kept it close, locking it even when stepping away for a moment. James couldn't pinpoint why this behavior unsettled him. He brushed it off, reminding himself of the trust they had built over the years. However, doubts began to creep in. James found himself replaying moments from their recent past, searching for clues. Was he imagining the flicker of hesitation in her eyes when he asked about her day? Was there something deeper behind her sudden interest in personal projects that took her away from home? James tried to push these thoughts aside. He told himself he was being paranoid, a symptom of his own insecurities. After all, they were still partners in every sense. Emily still kissed him goodnight, albeit hurriedly, and they still celebrated milestones together. To him, these small gestures meant that everything was fine. But deep down, the seeds of doubt had been planted. One evening, while helping Mia with her homework, James noticed a notification flash on Emily's laptop, which was left on the dining table. It was a message from someone he didn't recognize. Looking forward to tomorrow. Curiosity tugged at him, but he hesitated. Snooping felt wrong, a betrayal of the trust he so valued. Yet, the unease that had been brewing for months nudged him to take a closer look. But just as he was about to, Emily entered the room, quickly closing the laptop. Her smile seemed forced, and she brushed off his questioning glance with a comment about needing to finish an urgent project. That night, James lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He hated the doubts swirling in his mind but couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He resolved to confront Emily the next day. He hoped it was all a misunderstanding, a small hurdle they could overcome together. As the sun rose, James prepared himself for the conversation. He practiced his words, wanting to approach the topic delicately. He knew Emily cherished their harmony as much as he did, and he didn't want to jeopardize that by coming across as accusatory. When Emily finally joined him in the kitchen for breakfast, he decided to ease into the topic. "Hey Em," he began, his voice steady. "I've noticed you've been really busy lately. Everything okay?" Emily looked up from her coffee, her expression unreadable. "Yes, of course. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You've just seemed a little distracted," James said cautiously. "If there's something on your mind, you can tell me." Emily's smile was reassuring but brief. "I'm fine, James. Just a lot going on with work." She kissed him on the cheek and left the room, leaving James with more questions than answers. As days turned into weeks, James couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was keeping something from him. He knew he needed answers but wasn't sure how to find them without crossing a line. The trust that had been the foundation of their relationship felt shaky, and James feared what might happen if it crumbled entirely. Little did he know, the truth he was about to uncover would change their lives forever. James couldn't let go of the unease that had settled over him. The moments of doubt were no longer fleeting, they were becoming a constant hum in the background of his thoughts. He decided to approach the situation logically, much like he would a challenging architectural project. He needed to gather information, piece together the puzzle, and figure out the truth. The first step was observation. James began paying closer attention to Emily's routines. He noted her late nights, her increasing number of work meetings, and the way she seemed more guarded with her phone. He tried not to jump to conclusions but couldn't ignore the inconsistencies. One evening, while Emily was out, James decided to check their shared calendar. Emily had always been meticulous about updating it with her commitments, but lately it seemed oddly sparse. Meetings she mentioned weren't listed, and some entries had vague descriptions like client work or personal project. James's heart sank as he stared at the screen. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but the gaps in her stories were becoming too large to ignore. He felt torn between his love for Emily and the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. The next day, James confided in his best friend, Mark. Mark had been his roommate in college and knew both James and Emily well. Over coffee, James hesitantly shared his concerns, careful not to sound accusatory. Mark listened intently before offering his thoughts. "James, I know you value trust, but sometimes when something feels off, it's worth looking into. Maybe it's nothing, but you won't find peace until you know for sure." Encouraged by Mark's words, James decided to dig deeper. He started small, checking Emily's social media accounts. While most of her posts were the usual family updates, he noticed a few cryptic comments from someone named Alex. The messages weren't overtly suspicious, but they were enough to raise his curiosity. Who was Alex? James couldn't recall Emily mentioning anyone by that name. Determined to find out, he searched through their old photos and conversations, hoping to find a clue. But Alex remained a mystery. James's unease grew, and he knew he needed to confront Emily again. This time he planned to be more direct, hoping she would open up to him. As he prepared for the conversation, he couldn't help but wonder if he was ready to face the truth, whatever it might be. James couldn't shake the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. Every time he tried to convince himself that Emily's actions were innocent, a small voice reminded him of the inconsistencies. For years he had trusted Emily completely, but now, for the first time in their marriage, that trust felt fragile. One evening, Emily was preparing to leave for yet another late-night meeting. She seemed hurried, almost eager to leave. James decided he couldn't let her go without addressing the growing distance between them. "Emily," James said firmly, his voice cutting through the quiet of their home. "We need to talk." Emily paused mid-step, turning to face him. Her expression was guarded, her smile strained. "Can it wait? I'm already running late." "No, it can't," James replied. "This is important." Emily hesitated before sitting down across from him. "'Kay, James. What's on your mind?" James took a deep breath. "I've been feeling like something's off between us. You've been distant, secretive. And I can't ignore it anymore. If there's something going on, I need you to tell me." Emily's face hardened slightly. "James, I don't know what you're talking about. I've just been busy with work. You know how demanding it's been lately." "It's not just work," James countered. "You've changed. You guard your phone, you've been out more often, and you've stopped sharing things with me like you used to." "Emily, I just want to understand what's going on." For a moment, Emily looked conflicted, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to. Then she sighed. James, I'm sorry if I've made you feel this way. I've been under a lot of stress and maybe I've been handling it poorly. But there's nothing for you to worry about. Her words sounded reassuring, but her tone lacked the warmth James had always relied on. Before he could press further, Emily stood up. We'll talk more about this later, okay? I really have to go now. James watched her leave, his heart heavy with unanswered questions. That night, as James lay awake in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was keeping something from him. He decided to take action. If Emily wouldn't open up to him, he would have to find answers on his own. James reached out to Sarah, a private investigator recommended by his friend Mark. Sarah was empathetic yet professional, assuring James that her methods would remain discreet. I'll start with routine observations, Sarah explained. If there's anything unusual, I'll let you know right away. Over the next few weeks, Sarah kept James updated. For the most part, Emily's actions seemed innocent. Meetings, errands, and visits to familiar places. But then came a breakthrough. One afternoon, Sarah called with urgency in her voice. James, I found something you might want to know. Emily met someone at a cafe today. A man named Alex. They talked for quite some time. James's heart sank. What did they talk about? Did it seem personal? It's hard to say, Sarah replied. Their interaction wasn't overtly suspicious, but they seemed familiar and comfortable with each other. I thought you'd want to know. Hearing the name Alex again hit James like a punch to the gut. This was the same name he'd seen in the cryptic social media comments, the one Emily hadn't mentioned. Who was Alex? And why had Emily kept him a secret? James resolved to confront Emily that evening. When Emily returned home, James was waiting for her in the living room. His expression was calm but determined. Emily, we need to talk, he said. Emily looked surprised but nodded. What's wrong? James took a deep breath. I know about Alex. I know you've been meeting him. Emily froze for a moment before her expression shifted to confusion. Alex? What about him? Who is he, Emily? James asked. And why haven't you told me about him? Emily hesitated before replying. Alex is an old friend. He's going through a tough time and I've been trying to help him. That's all. If that's all, why keep it a secret? James pressed. Why not tell me about him? Emily sighed, her frustration evident. Because I knew you'd react like this. You'd overthink it, and it's nothing, James. Alex is just a friend. James wanted to believe her, but her defensiveness only deepened his doubts. Emily, I need you to be honest with me. If there's nothing to hide, why the secrecy? Emily stood abruptly, her tone sharp. I don't have to explain myself, James. I've done nothing wrong. With that, she left the room, leaving James alone with his thoughts. The following day, James decided to dig deeper. He retrieved Sarah's latest report and noticed something curious. Emily and Alex had met at a specific cafe multiple times in the past month. James decided to visit the cafe himself, hoping to uncover more about these meetings. When he arrived, he spoke to a barista, casually inquiring about Emily. Has a woman with dark brown hair and green eyes been coming here often? She usually meets a man. The barista nodded. Yeah, they're regulars. They always sit in the corner booth. Real friendly but quiet. James thanked the barista and left, his mind racing. He felt no closer to understanding the truth, yet the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. Little did he know, the answers he sought would soon come to light, answers that would change his life forever. James's unease grew with each passing day. The confrontation with Emily had only deepened the chasm between them, and the questions swirling in his mind remained unanswered. Who was Alex, really? Was he just a friend in need, as Emily claimed, or something more? James decided that if Emily wouldn't share the truth, he would uncover it himself. One evening, while Emily was out, James found himself sitting at the dining table, staring at her laptop. It was unlocked, the screen glowing softly in the dimly lit room. He hesitated, his heart pounding with guilt. Snooping felt wrong, an invasion of privacy, but he justified it to himself as a last resort. After a deep breath, James opened her email. At first, everything seemed normal: work correspondence, newsletters, and family updates. But then he noticed a folder labeled Personal. Clicking on it, he found a series of messages exchanged with Alex. The emails were vague but hinted at a level of familiarity that made James uneasy. Phrases like, "Thanks for being there for me," and "I don't know what I'd do without you," jumped out at him. They weren't explicitly romantic, but they carried an emotional weight that felt misplaced. James's stomach churned. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was clear that Emily and Alex shared a bond she hadn't disclosed. He saved screenshots of the emails before closing the laptop, feeling both guilty and justified. The next day, James decided to follow up with Sarah. He shared what he'd found and asked her to dig deeper into Alex's background. Within a week, Sarah returned with a detailed report. "Alex Bennett," Sarah began, handing James a folder. "He's a marketing consultant based in the city. Divorced, no kids. He met Emily through a mutual professional contact about a year ago." James flipped through the pages, his hands trembling. The report detailed Alex's recent activities, including his frequent meetings with Emily. One particular detail caught James's attention. Alex had recently been let go from his job and was struggling financially. "Do you think Emily is helping him out?" James asked. "It's possible," Sarah replied. "But there's no clear indication of anything beyond that." James wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or frustrated. The lack of concrete evidence left him in limbo, unsure of how to move forward. Determined to get answers, James decided to confront Alex directly. He tracked him down to a co-working space where Sarah had reported seeing him. Summoning all his courage, James approached Alex as he exited the building. "Alex Bennett?" James asked, his voice steady but firm. Alex turned, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm James, Emily's husband," James said, watching Alex closely for his reaction. Alex's face registered surprise, then a flicker of guilt. "Oh, James. Nice to meet you." James wasted no time. "I know you've been meeting with Emily. I need to know what's going on between you two." Alex hesitated, glancing around as if searching for an escape. "Look, James, it's not what you think. Emily has been helping me through a tough time, that's all." "Then why all the secrecy?" James pressed. "Why didn't she tell me about you?" Alex sighed. "Because she didn't want you to worry. I've been dealing with some personal issues, and Emily has been a supportive friend. I swear, there's nothing inappropriate going on." James studied Alex's expression, searching for signs of dishonesty. While Alex's words seemed genuine, the secrecy surrounding their relationship still didn't sit right with him. "Does she know I'm here?" James asked. "No," Alex admitted. "And honestly, I think you should talk to her directly. I have nothing to hide, but this is between you two." James nodded, his mind racing. He thanked Alex and walked away, more determined than ever to get the truth from Emily. That evening, James confronted Emily once again. This time he didn't hold back. "I spoke to Alex today," James said as soon as Emily walked through the door. Emily froze, her face pale. "You what?" "I needed answers, and I wasn't getting them from you," James replied. "He told me you've been helping him through a rough time. Is that true?" "Yes, it's true," Emily said defensively. "Alex is a friend who needed support. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact." "Overreact?" James echoed, his voice rising. "Emily, you've been keeping secrets from me, meeting with another man behind my back. How am I supposed to react?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to come to this, James. I was trying to protect our relationship." "Protect it?" James asked incredulously. "By hiding things from me? That's not how trust works, Emily." The room fell silent, the weight of their unspoken fears hanging between them. I need time to process this, James finally said, his voice quiet. I love you, Emily, but I can't keep living with this uncertainty. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, James. I never meant to hurt you. As James retreated to the guest room that night, he couldn't help but wonder, was their marriage salvageable, or had the cracks in their foundation grown too wide to repair? The days following their confrontation were marked by an uneasy silence in the house. James and Emily moved around each other carefully, like strangers who shared the same space but were afraid to meet each other's gaze. The once vibrant and loving atmosphere in their home felt hollow. Their children, Mia and Ethan, sensed the tension and asked why their parents seemed distant, but James and Emily reassured them with forced smiles and vague explanations about being busy. James spent most nights in the guest room, unable to bring himself to share the same bed with Emily. His mind replayed their argument over and over, dissecting every word and gesture. Despite Alex's assurances and Emily's tearful apologies, James couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Emily, on the other hand, tried to bridge the gap between them. She left notes for James, reminding him of happier times, and made an effort to engage him in conversations. But James's responses were curt, his walls firmly in place. One evening, Emily suggested counseling. James, she began hesitantly, I think we need help. Maybe talking to someone, together, could help us understand what's happened and where we go from here. James looked at her, his face unreadable. Counseling? You think talking to a stranger will fix this? It's not about fixing, Emily said softly. It's about healing. I know I've hurt you and I hate what this has done to us. But I don't want to give up on us, James. Her words stirred something in James. Despite his anger and distrust, he still loved Emily. The idea of opening up to a counselor felt daunting, but if it could help them find clarity, he was willing to try. All right, James said after a long pause. We'll try counseling. Their first session with Dr. Harper, a calm and empathetic therapist, was both awkward and illuminating. Dr. Harper encouraged them to share their perspectives openly, creating a safe space for their emotions. Emily spoke first, her voice trembling. I know I've made mistakes, and I take full responsibility for keeping things from you, James. I was trying to help Alex, but I went about it the wrong way. I didn't realize how much my actions would hurt you. James listened, his jaw tight. When it was his turn, he let out the frustration he had been bottling up. Emily, you say you were trying to help, but you shut me out. You made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. How am I supposed to trust you again? Dr. Harper gently intervened. James, it's clear that trust is a major issue here. Rebuilding it will take time, effort, and transparency from both of you. Emily, how can you show James that you're committed to regaining his trust? Emily looked at James, her eyes filled with sincerity. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be completely honest about everything. No more secrets. Dr. Harper nodded. That's a good start. But James, trust isn't just about Emily's actions. It's also about your willingness to believe in her again. Are you ready to work on that? James hesitated before nodding. I don't know how long it will take, but I'm willing to try. Over the next few weeks, James and Emily attended counseling sessions regularly. Emily began sharing more about her interactions with Alex, providing details that reassured James there was no romantic involvement. She even invited James to meet Alex again, this time in a more neutral setting, to help dispel any lingering doubts. The meeting was cordial but uncomfortable. Alex apologized for any misunderstanding his friendship with Emily had caused, emphasizing that he had never intended to come between them. James appreciated Alex's candor, but the encounter left him emotionally drained. Trust was a fragile thing, and while Emily's efforts were genuine, the road to rebuilding their bond felt long and uncertain. One evening, as they sat together after putting the kids to bed, Emily reached for James's hand. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. James looked at her, his expression softening for the first time in weeks. I don't want to lose what we have, Emily. But it's going to take time. I know, Emily said, tears welling up in her eyes. And I'll wait as long as it takes. In that moment, James saw the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Not perfect, but human and deeply remorseful. It was a small step toward healing, but it was a step nonetheless. As they sat together in the quiet of their home, the cracks in their foundation began to feel less like irreparable fractures and more like scars that could eventually heal, given enough care and patience. The weeks that followed were a mix of progress and setbacks. Counseling sessions helped James and Emily confront the emotions they had buried for years, both the good and the bad. They learned to communicate more openly, to listen without judgment, and to recognize the patterns that had contributed to their distance. But the journey was far from easy. James struggled with moments of doubt, especially when he was alone. Sometimes, he would replay the events in his mind, wondering if he had missed something crucial. But Emily's actions spoke louder than words. She went out of her way to include him in her life, sharing her thoughts, her plans, and even her calendar without being asked. She deleted the messages with Alex, not because James demanded it, but because she wanted to prove that her loyalty lay with her family. One day, Emily brought home a surprise, a scrapbook filled with photos and memories from their 10 years together. She handed it to James, her eyes glistening with hope. "I thought this might remind us of what we've built together," she said softly. James opened the book and was immediately hit with a wave of nostalgia. There were pictures of their wedding, the birth of Mia and Ethan, family vacations, and candid moments he had forgotten. Each page was a testament to the life they had created, a life worth fighting for. That evening they sat together on the couch, flipping through the scrapbook and sharing stories. For the first time in months, laughter filled the room, breaking through the tension that had weighed on them for so long. It was a turning point. As the months went by, the cracks in their relationship began to mend. James started to feel the walls around his heart lower, and Emily proved time and again that she was committed to their marriage. Their children, oblivious to the struggles their parents had faced, basked in the renewed warmth of their home. But the journey wasn't without its lessons. James realized that trust wasn't just about transparency, it was also about vulnerability. For years, he had avoided conflict, thinking it would preserve their harmony, but he now understood that true intimacy required facing the hard truths together. Emily, on her part, learned the importance of honesty. She had thought she was protecting James by keeping certain things from him, but she had only built a wall between them. The experience taught her that a strong marriage wasn't about avoiding difficult conversations but about embracing them head-on. One evening after putting the kids to bed, James and Emily sat on the porch watching the stars. Emily leaned her head on James's shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't flinch or pull away. "I'm sorry for everything," Emily said quietly. "For breaking your trust." James took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "And I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. We both made mistakes, but I think we're stronger for it." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I love you, James." "I love you too," he replied, his voice steady. "And I believe in us." In the end, James and Emily emerged from their trials not as the perfect couple they had once been perceived to be, but as a real couple, flawed, resilient, and deeply committed to each other. Their love had been tested, and while the scars remained, they were a reminder of what they had overcome. Life wasn't picture perfect anymore, but it was real. And that was enough.